Hello, everyone. It's Lou Rosenfeld. Greetings from February 5th, 2015. I've got Steve Portigal on the line. Hey, Steve.
Hey there. Nice to be on the mic with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of these days I hope to be on the other end on Dollars to Donuts, which is one of my all-time favorite expressions. So you SOB, you grabbed that name for your podcast before it even occurred to me.
I try.
So I've only taken about the first 30 seconds to swear. I hope that'll be my last one. But Steve is with us today because he's doing me and a few other people a huge favor. Steve, who you may know is the author of the wonderful Rosenfeld media book, Interviewing Users, an instant classic. I'm not at all biased in saying that. Steve is joining us because he is also what's called a theme leader for one of the 4 themes at the forthcoming Enterprise User Experience Conference that Rosenfeld Media and Rackspace are putting on May 13th through 15th in San Antonio. Now, this not only is the first Enterprise UX conference that we put together and is really just essentially it's an opportunity to have a conversation about how we create better experiences for people who work in and with enterprises. But we have 4 themes that make up the bulk of the conference, and Steve is running with one of them. I'll just run through those 4 themes really quickly, and then I want to talk about Steve's. Steve's is insight at scale. So we'll talk in more depth, but essentially in an enterprise setting where there's lots of silos, including all the various customer and user research functions, how do you pull that together in a way that arrives at true insight? So that's one of the 4 themes, and the other 3 are craft amid complexity, how we talk about doing our work in an enterprise setting, enterprise experimentation, how we can take small steps to learn about what works and what doesn't work in settings that aren't necessarily typically very friendly to tweaking and tuning in small ways. And then the 4th theme is around designing organizational culture. So how do we change as user experience people and what we do in the enterprise setting, but also how do we change the enterprise and how it does things. So let's go to that first theme, insight at scale. And Steve, why did we get you? Why do you think we put you on the spot to tackle this one?
I was cheap and available. That's the dumb answer. Well, I was certainly pleased to be asked because I think what this lets me do is be involved in a broader discussion where we're bringing together different kinds of perspectives. And, I think that's although I'm the guy that wrote that book, I'm also someone that I think has done a lot of facilitating other people getting their stories about research out. You mentioned Dollars to Donuts. I've been collecting fieldwork war stories. So I think part of my role in the field, as I've assigned for myself anyway, is to be involved in the discussions that different people with different lenses are having about the work of research. I should ask you why did you ask me to do this? But that's certainly why it appealed to me, that it felt consistent with some other things that I've done.
Absolutely, and I was being kind of mean, but I wanted to get in front of it because I knew you'd ask me, so I got there first. But now you can put me on the spot, and exactly, you have depth in interviewing, obviously, not just interviewing, but what I've always really enjoyed about your perspective and our conversations about what comes next now that you've written the book on that subject, is that you're looking at this more broadly. You're looking at research more broadly, and you're not a chauvinist all around, one method being the method. And so it seemed like a natural fit to bring you together with the 3 speakers that we have in your theme. And by the way, everyone, these 4 themes at the conference are each like a mini conference. And in this case, Steve is essentially the leader of that mini conference. And he's working with three really fantastic people. I'll describe them really quickly. Many of you already know Kelly Goto, author of Web Redesign, who has Goto Research, a small consultancy in San Francisco. And I think she would style herself as a design ethnographer. The second person is Chris Chapo, who is a data scientist who's done a lot with Apple and Intuit, and obviously takes a very different and more statistically driven or even really quantitative perspective on research. And then finally, the third of the three speakers that Steve is working with is Christian Rohrer, who I love his work, The Landscape of User Research Methods. Christian is really a great person for taking a lot of the different methods in the kind of canonical HCI way of thinking about user research and putting them together and mapping them and making sense of them with that landscape of user research methods. Christian is a user experience leader at McAfee and has been at places like Yahoo and Move before that. So three people coming at it from three different, very different perspectives. Steve, how do you think they're going to fit together? Do you think they're going to be pretty different when it comes down to their three presentations?
Yeah, and without doing too much inside baseball that will, put people asleep while they're doing whatever they're doing while listening, I think this notion of the mini conference is exactly how we're approaching it. And, rather than, I think this is why you've asked me to take this role, rather than kind of collecting individual submissions or soliciting those and kind of, having them go 1, 2, 3, is that we're trying to come together collectively and, get these different brains and these different creators and come up with a point of view. So, we've been meeting and planning and sort of talking about, well, what are the challenges to bring insight into the scale of the enterprise, and just really, I think the diversity of the perspectives and the skills that we've brought together has made for some really fascinating conversations. And I'm sort of lucky to, yes, I'm facilitating that interaction, but really I'm also just kind of scooping the cream off of it because it's pretty interesting. And as we're trying to get at, what are the challenges of enterprise? And you mentioned kind of the distributed types of users and the distributed teams. And when we last time we met, we also talked a lot about the different kinds of data that exist, sort of quote big data, and then things that look more qualitative that do or don't exist and where they are, and they're kind of distributed and diffuse. And that I think this is where all three of these, like that was, I think, the moment in the conversation where we started to feel like, oh, these three folks have, different perspectives and expertise, but it's all around this thing. And I am kind of, it's nascent, and I think you can hear its emergence in my inability to give you kind of a talking point on it. But I think this journey that we're on collectively now to bring multiple perspectives that understand, that can facilitate a conversation together around this topic, it's already very exciting for us. And to think about what's enterprise specific, and of course we all have experience with that, but we don't always reflect and articulate on, well, what are the challenges in these environments? So, and we looked at Christian's landscape, and that was kind of a galvanizing point for us. And so, to look at, Chris, who's got some experiences working with UX types from a data scientist point of view, and that, kind of how do two tribes come together? But that's maybe a one end of the spectrum of types of data. It's sort of the hardest, biggest data, and someone like Kelly that's looking at, sort of the softest, most insightful data. Well, there's my bias, there's my chauvinism, but a certain kind of insight comes out of ethnography. And so, if those guys are existing on a continuum, they represent these endpoints, and Christian is kind of, he's got the overview about, how do we choose which conversations to have internally, politically, and how do we choose which data sources to bring in together to get the most richest actionable perspective on it. So I'm super excited to see kind of a synthesis of, yes, ultimately we're going to have three people get up and talk in sort of this program and this mini conference, but if we keep going down the path that we're on now, I think we're going to, produce an interesting perspective that then, of course, becomes the conversation going forward about what does it mean? How do we sort of tackle, how do we think about, how do we talk about, and how do we act on the challenges of getting at insight in these very specific environments?
So let me ask you this. This is an oversimplification, but if let's say these are the two major challenges that people who are doing research in the enterprise setting are facing. One is doing the actual research at scale. And then the other is taking those various flavors of research created by those different tribes, and then, like the blind men and the elephant, putting them together to get a true picture of the elephant, to get at true insight. Do you think that this theme is going to be more about the former or the latter at this point?
I mean, I think when you say scale, we start to think, oh, the enterprise has, this many types of customers and this many of them and so on. We think about numbers as scale, but I feel like, and again, I apologize for the, the shakiness of this emergent thinking, but I feel like scale brings up other kinds of challenges, like the cultural barriers to getting at the data, the diffusion and distribution of existing types of data is a scale challenge, as opposed to the fact that we have, 20,000 users. We also have, 7 teams in 12 countries, or we have, a very active sales-driven organization that is very proprietary about their relationships and what they know about them. So those are scale aspects of the challenge that I think are kind of interesting. I'm probably just dodging your question entirely.
Oh, no, that's okay. And everyone, I am really putting Steve on the spot here. I didn't even tell him what I'd be asking him. So, and Steve, you're doing a great job considering how mean and cruel I'm being to you. And it's early, and yet I feel like what you're talking about here, I almost get the sense that maybe you guys will, if not solve some big problems together around doing research and achieving insight at scale, you're going to at least create maybe a framework, maybe building on Christian Rohrer's work and taking it further, that leads to some really productive outcomes for the rest of us once we get that framework set for us by your theme. So anything else you want to add?
Well, I'll just add that I think the theme construct, and again, it's the inside baseball aspect here in terms of what we're doing to get ready for this event. But the theme and the theme leader means that we're able to have these conversations. And one of the things that it's a little bit of cat herding to be the organizer. And what really touched me was how excited these folks were to talk to each other. And our theme is all Bay Area people, and so these folks who are crazy busy and doing a lot of amazing things started talking about getting together to continue this conversation. So I feel like in terms of setting up a conference where we're going to talk about stuff, again, these 3 folks and with me and my role, we're coming together to think about it and talk about it in a way that it's the gestalt, right? I don't think any one of us could have got to where we're going to get to. So that's just it's feeling already kind of, as we're in this stage of the planning, a really effective. And I do a lot of conferences and in a lot of different roles, but this feels, just from a content point of view, it feels really like we're contributing something new. And especially given the topic and how crucial, but also how fresh it is, I don't know, I'm pretty excited to be part of it. And I don't want to. I want to try to under-promise so that people that come will be, over-delivered upon. But feels like something interesting is happening here, and that we're stimulated and we're talking to each other. So I think that's got to translate to, what we all will bring to San Antonio.
I think it will, and we've designed these themes with the hope that the sum would be greater than the wonderful parts that make them up. And we're real excited to have you and Kelly and Chris and Christian. Thanks so much, Steve. I hope everyone listening will give some consideration to joining us in San Antonio, May 13th through 15th. The URL for Enterprise UX 2015 is enterpriseux.net. This is an event not just for UX people, but for anyone who cares about delivering good experiences for and within the enterprise. So if you're a product manager, if you're an IT person or developer or marketing person, or what are known as decision makers, we think you'll get something out of this. And we hope to see you in San Antonio. Thanks again, Steve.
And there will be donuts, I'm given to understand.
I am told there will be donuts.
Yeah, so then I will definitely see you and see everyone there.
All right. Take care. Thanks again.